presence doesn't make an impact, then your absence won't make a difference. I love this quote. If your presence doesn't make an impact, then your absence won't make a difference. Rhetorically, how does that make you feel? We all know that special someone that when we get together with them, they make us light up like a Christmas tree. They make us laugh when we want to cry, and they always tell a good tale. And we know the Debbie Downers bring us down, and then there's that creepy guy that's in the corner of that. Never says much. What's his name again? In business, we want to be successful. So we do all the right things. We learn, we grow, we strategize, we service, and we sell. No one likes to be sold to, but everybody likes to be well serviced, right? So today we're going to look at some story strategy and how we can use neuroscience and entertainment techniques, bring that together and tell a story. So we invest a lot of time in building the right team and making the right things come together for the business with strategy. And sometimes we even buy the right clothes. I'm thankful I don't have to wear this today while I'm here. And why don't we invest in things like excellent communication skills with our business, and empathy and sincerity and transparency and finding the right humor and how to deliver it? Because those, my friends, are the top 5 traits that research shows that we like to see in other people. Maybe because we don't have enough time, because it takes time to figure out how to do those things. And it takes practice, a lot of practice, like getting to Carnegie Hall. So, raise your hand if you are considered successful amongst your peers in business. No, come on, this is a CEO. Raise your other hand if you told lies as a toddler. Research shows that children who start telling lies at the age of 2 are more likely to be successful because they have a faster. This is not a lie, it's real research. The interesting thing about this is what I liked was that 12-year-olds are the most deceitful age. So any of you who have 12-year-olds in and around your family, you probably want to get an interrogation room and a lie detector test. Just that. So everyone's heard, or maybe you've even said to someone at some point in your life, stop telling stories. And I wonder if the reason why we stop telling stories is because at some point in our life, we turn from stories to the facts and figures because stories become associated with lies. I had a research on this, but I've been eaten by a squirrel. Couldn't share it with you. Not such a great joke, but it's worth a try, right? You've got to try your jokes on people and see how they work. So, we have rewarding stimuli built into us biologically. Things like play, and pain, and laughter, and what is that? I just off the top of my head, I've lost it. I can't think of the other one. And
Memory?
Memory. No, actually, that's not rewarding stimuli. Sexual courtship.
Love that.
Thank you. There you go. That was the last one. And we have an automatic response from this type of stimuli. So we automatically respond to that, and story is a wonderful way to touch into those emotions because that rewarding stimuli, like play and laughter, gives us emotion, therefore it gives us a memory, and we can influence positive decisions by using memory. So, an image goes into our brain in 1/10 of a second. Aaron was talking about imagery and how important it is and how emotion there can move us, and it's incredibly true. And I just want to share a story with you. At one point in my life, I was in a really detrimental relationship and I had to leave it, and I knew I had to leave it even though I was still in love with the person at the time. And so I went through this difficult phase because he was trying to get me back and I was thinking about going back. So I'm like, so I came up with this idea before I even knew the neuroscience. With this image, I'll just have this one image. What's the worst memory about the relationship that every time I even consider going back to it, I think of this image? And it worked because I was like, oh hell no, there was no way that was ever happening again. And it was just like that in 1/10 of a second. Memorization. There are different types of memorization techniques and how to learn the memorization of a presentation, and there's various different ways you can do it, like the loci method, but each one of them have a different form of organizing images or pictures. I like to think of that rewarding stimuli as pictures, sounds, and feelings, because that's the way we sort of work. And sounds is tone of voice. 38% of how we communicate is our tone of voice. So you want to be really careful with your tone of voice and use your tone of voice, especially if you do anything on the phone like WebEx and stuff like that. Tone of voice is really important when telling stories. Bring it in. Bedtime stories. Think of it like that, you know. 10% of conflicts are usually due to an argument. 90% is due to the wrong tone of voice. We physically hold emotions in our bodies, in our jaw, like anger, or in our fists. These are cats, and we can see exactly how they feel. 93% of how we communicate is non-verbal. So if you think about it from that perspective, if you're in front of an audience, or even just one other person, you're always going to be communicating in conversation. If you're actually listening to your audience, you can read their behavior. So neuroscience is finally catching up with the entertainment industry and proving to us that there are scientific studies and research that actually work on how we communicate. Whereas the entertainment industry has been doing it for decades and sometimes centuries, where they edit pictures, sounds, and feelings to create mirror neurons in our body, which creates emotion and memory and then an outcome. There are some scientists believe that certain mirror neurons are created for certain reasons, but no one really knows. There's still a lot of speculation. But all scientists agree that if you break a mirror neuron, it's 7 years bad luck. Okay, that was a really bad joke too. At least I know they're not working, right? That's the main thing here. So the other interesting thing about mirror neurons, and one thing that they've discovered, is that laughter is the most contagious behavior that we have. And it fires off the most mirror neurons. Therefore, it's a bonding thing. We bond to the things that we laugh with. It's the fastest way you can bond to another human being or a group of people. The other thing about laughter that's really interesting is that there are 10 hormones that are released. When you do things like exercise, you get endorphins. When you do things like touch another person, you get oxytocin. My favorite hormone is what I like to call the naughty hormone, is dopamine. Because whatever gives us dopamine gets us hooked on dopamine. She don't lie, she don't lie, she don't lie. Dopamine. Dopamine gives us feeling of bliss and euphoria, but the other thing it gives us is really focused feeling. So imagine making decisions from a really awesome feeling when you're really focused. And that's how we can create dopamine through our presentations in order to get memory and influence decisions out the other end. Debbie Downers and boring Bobs influence us in a negative way. And I would like to do a small experiment with you guys, if you don't mind. So will you do something with me?
Yeah.
Okay, good. Thank you. Such a... So if I do something, follow me, and then just do what I say, basically. So, clap if you have ever been in a film where you cried. It made you cry. Harder if you were in a film that made you laugh. If you were ever emotionally moved by an actor's performance in the theatre. That was a good standing O, I can't remember. Thank you. The reason why we're emotionally moved by actors is not because they're pretending, it's because actors are acting truthfully under an imaginary circumstance. Bad actors are pretending. Actors use the tools of emotions and behavioural understanding to create characters. And several years ago, I was in a feature film in the core cast, and one of the members of production came up to me afterwards and said to me, I watched every single take you took in the editing room, and there was no artifice in your performance whatsoever. It's obvious that you haven't had as much training as the rest of the cast. Some of them were quite famous people. And I laughed, and I said, actually, no, I probably had the most training of the entire cast put together, and I'm an acting coach. And he was floored. Because acting, like leadership, is 85% learned behaviour. It's techniques that are practiced over years and years and years. And you get good at it because you practice, so anyone can learn it. It's not just something that you're born with. Mirror neurons. Seeing someone get pricked in the face with a pin evokes mirror neurons in the person who's watching. And they have empathy for that whole concept. Movies are a great form of pin poking because they take pictures, sounds, and feelings, and they strategically edit them to give us emotion and memory and a result. Raise your hand if you've ever watched a movie and at the end of the movie, maybe it was like a really deep relationship movie or something like that between family members or friends, or at the end of the film, it really, pulled on your heartstrings and it made you want to reach out and touch someone. Anyone? Some of you are heartless. Must be some high D's in the room. Okay. So, how do we take story, add in a little neuroscience and some entertainment techniques and come out with a result? Carmen Simon is a neuroscientist. Her book is called Impossible to Ignore, if you're interested in reading it. She's got some really good insight in there. She's spent decades going through and researching how to create memorable content in order to get positive decision making out the other end. And she says there's 15 variables, and although one variable on its own is not necessarily going to work, some of them grouped together can and will. Those variables are context, distinctiveness, emotion, facts, familiarity, motivation, novelty, quantity of information, relevance, repetition, self-content, self-generating content, sensory intensity, social access, cues, and my favourite, surprise. So if you strategically space these out within some stimuli, you can come up with a presentation that is more likely to be memorable and react in a positive decision. So, what are some of these things that we can do? So, we can have a really strong hook. And that's something like the 30-second elevator pitch, always open with a strong hook. Edit your material and your stories to be succinct, and have some stories that connect and move people. And then you want to learn how to tell those stories. And get Italian. Don't be afraid to actually tell a story with some of your hand movements. And if it's something that you're not really into because you're kind of shy, like Aaron took a while to even speak to people originally, practice it. Practice makes perfect, and our body gets used to it, and our biology changes and we'll move with it. It's just practice. And then you want to add in a little bit of humor, right, and wrap that around your facts and figures and learn how to have good timing, because all of that drives dopamine. And when people get dopamine, they want a little bit more. We like hanging out with our favourite people who make us laugh, and that's important. You have a presentation and you have to put slides together. Choose what your top 10% is. What do you really want to drive home? What do you really want to wrap that dopamine around, or that humour around, with a story or the images? Pick out what the strongest images are and place them throughout the whole presentation, and then make them salient. So the things that are either side of them are going to make them stand out. The most important thing is your moment before. Whether you're about to have a conversation with somebody or you're getting to up front of an audience, what is that moment before? When I was a stand-up comedian, I had a presentation a show that I did, where I was paid a reasonable amount of money for it, and I was kind of nervous before I went up. One of the comedians came up to me and he got in my head. He got in my head maliciously and under my skin, and he threw me tremendously. And when I got up on stage, I had the worst set of my entire life, and I bombed. And I was lit halfway through that set, and I got off 10 minutes early. And the comedian came up to me after that set, and he said, "Why did you let me get into your head? Why did you give me that much control?" And at the time, I could have got really angry with him, but I chose to see it as a learning moment. Yeah, I gave him power to get in my head and screw my entire setup. So whenever you're about to present or give a message that you have something powerful that you're going to give, or you believe that it's a gift or that you really want to say it, make sure that your moment before is taken care of. And you don't let anything or anybody throw you off kilter before you give that message. And practice is incredibly important. I can't say this enough. And there's simple things that you can practice. It doesn't mean you have to get all theatrical. It's like meditation. People think they have to light candles and put on slacks and be kumbaya. But you don't. You just have to sit thoughtfully on your bed and just zone out a little bit. Men are really good at that, I understand. But practice is really important. And for those of you who have seen stand-up comedians riff with an audience, or an improv artist just create a story out of nothing, they're not just creating a story out of nothing. They've learned an incredible series of rules and techniques over decades, in some cases, of their lives, and that's their craft, and they're really good at it. And they've practiced and practiced. They never wing anything. You know, Mark Twain has this saying, it usually takes me more than 3 weeks to prepare a good impromptu speech. It's true, you know. I have a story where in 2015, I was asked to go to Irvine and coach a big international presentation for TEDx. And on the second day, the producer came up to me and he's like, Stephanie, will you go and host in between the speakers? And I'm like, what an honor. No. And he's like, why not? And I said, because I've just been coaching 20-odd speakers for an entire week, telling them not to wing anything, be prepared, rehearse. And you're asking me to go on stage, and a little voice in the back of my head said, just challenge yourself. I'm like, okay. 5 minutes later, I was mic'd up, and I walked out onto the red spot, and I'm chatting away with the audience. 2 minutes into it, look into the wings, there's no speaker. Okay, so we're going to make up some bullshit. So I keep going. 2 minutes later, I look into the wings, and there's still no speaker. So I say to the audience, well, ladies and gentlemen, we've obviously got a little technical pitch here. And if I had a guitar, I'd play you a song, but I don't, so I'll just dance. A cappella, for you, shut up. And I did this. And the audience went crazy. And I'm like, that was the cleanest joke I've ever told. And anyway, so the speaker was there, and I'm like, awesome. So I introduce him, and I walk off stage. Everybody's freaking out. The producer comes running up to me. He's like, Stephanie, it's illegal for a woman to move seductively in Iran on stage. You just danced in front of 1,800 people. I'm like, that move was considered seductive? Okay, I'm going to die. Honestly, for the next 20 minutes of my life, I thought I was going to die. It might be an extreme example of not to wing it, but even seasoned professionals shouldn't wing it for things like that. You know, I found this quote, and it says, one of the cruelest things you can do to another person is pretend you care about them more than you do. And the reason why I share that is because I think people forget to care about their audiences. And they walk out on stage with an agenda. And if you think about it, if 93% of how we communicate is non-verbal, then it's always going to be a conversation. You know? So we need to remember that, and we need to add in surprise and sensory things that make us feel and get emotional. And if you're not having fun, then neither is your audience. So figure out a way. You don't have to be a stand-up comedian, because 86% of what we laugh at is things that we connect to and bond with, and maybe it's just the elephant in the room. If you're aware and you're listening to your audience in your space, you'll always be able to pick up something humorous. So remember, it's the mirror neurons that connect us. Don't break them, because then we don't bond. Always look to have the fun side, because your presence doesn't make an impact, and your absence might.